You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcasters.
That's not true. That's impossible.
Hello, Force fanatics, and welcome to episode 196 of Making Tracks, brought to you by those fine folk over at fanfortracks.com. And joining me this week, as always, is a man who's higher than Kelnacca smoking a crack pipe. It's Mr. Mark Newbold. Mark, how you doing?
I'm very good, Mark. How are you?
Very, very good, man. And I suppose one could say this is almost our Acolyte pre-show, because we have been doing some bits and bobs for the Acolyte this last week, which has been very fun.
It has been fun, and it's been exciting. I think it's been an exciting run into the show. It feels like it's a long time coming, and it's right, as you say, right on our doorstep now. We're about to go. Fantha and you and me with Making Tracks and all the other stuff that's buzzing around the site. We're all geared up, ready to pile into this. But not just us, it's the whole fandom. So yes, you're right, it has been an exciting run-up.
I mean, I think part of it's down to the fact that when we had Ahsoka, obviously, we were in the midst of the writer's strike.
Yeah.
And so the promotion was very low-key. There wasn't any premieres. What we were invited to, at least, I think you were there. Well, in fact, you were there. It was just a preview night at BFI, which was great in itself. You know, it wasn't a red carpet. We queued outside like normal fans. Obviously felt a little bit low-key, and that feels like it was a missed opportunity. Obviously, they couldn't do anything because of writer's strike. So I think they've kind of doubled down. One is because they're really confident with what they've got with the Acolyte. And two, I think it's almost to maybe make up a little bit for lost time for not being able to promote and push Ahsoka in the way that they probably would have liked to.
It very much feels like that. I think I actually said that on the site in an article the other day. Exactly what you just said. Writer's strike and all the other stuff that was going on just nullified it. I mean, it's a year ago now, it don't really matter, but I know I was on a round table with the three lead actresses from Ahsoka, and then the day later I wasn't, because it was completely cancelled, which was kind of heartbreaking. Would have been rather cool to have chatted to those ladies, especially about that show at the time that it was, you know, right ahead of it. Opportunity never came around again, though, so let's fingers crossed for the Ahsoka season 2. But now, as you say, for the Acolyte, good grief, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, if you're not digging the run up to the Acolyte, if you're a Star Wars fan and you're not buying into this in any measure, I would say, one, Star Wars socials and Star Wars internet and Star Wars podcasts probably ain't the place for you right now. And two, Fantha Tracks definitely isn't, because every other, I'm trying to space them out a little bit, you know, so it's not all Acolyte, but it's difficult because pretty much everything right now is Acolyte focused. So lots going on.
So how was your premiere experience then?
It was different for different people, weirdly.
Yeah.
I had quite a conversation. There was a little group that got together, a little WhatsApp group, and there was some of the Star Wars Sessions guys and Charlie Ashby, who people know from the Imperial Senate podcast, and a few other folks that were in there. And everybody in that group, it seemed, had different premiere tickets, types of tickets. So for me, I met with Brian Herring, BB-8, and ours was a red carpet ticket. So as your lovely partner Karen took a wonderful picture of me raring at the camera for some reason, I don't even know what I was saying, but we just walked down the red carpet, literally, and were ushered in and straight to our seats, popcorn and cans of water. I'll never understand cans of water. And there we were. You couldn't come back out again, other than going to the toilets, because the security people wouldn't let you back out. Some of the guys, like the Sessions guys, got into the fan pens. So they got to meet the cast as they went up and down the red carpet, which was very cool. And there's some lovely photographs from there. So it was a real mixture. It said smart dress. So I, my jacket on, and I did make the effort. But it was unusual. But then, hey, you're at a Star Wars premiere. You're sitting there about to watch 2 episodes of the new Star Wars show. All good for me. How about you?
For the rest of the fan groups of Rebel Legion, along with Mando Mercs, Five First, and TDE and Saber Guild, Jake Squad and Matt, we all had limited number of tickets to attend as fans. There was request that if you had a generic Jedi costume, and it was pretty clear that it had to be just a generic, not a face character of any era, you could wear it And so, yeah, they went down into the fan pen kind of thing, which they all had a great time. Obviously, I'm talking about it. I wasn't there. And strictly speaking, I kind of wasn't. I couldn't get the time off to do the fan pen. So I was able to speak to the organizer and get tickets to just attend the screening so I could actually watch it. But all the going on and people being, meeting celebrities and stuff on the red carpet, I missed. The hour and a bit drive to Covent Garden was constantly being pinged on my phone, which of course I didn't look at any photos from Karen and other people going, oh my God, can't believe you're not here. And here's this person, here's this famous person, blah, 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 blah. I'm sat in traffic in Knightsbridge, not really going anywhere, thinking I'm not even going to probably make the bloody screening. Luckily I did, but it was the fastest mile and a half I've ever run in my life. Then got there, got my ticket. And again, everybody's in the pens and I'm just asked to go down the red carpet. So they're like, why are you there and not here and stuff like that? So that was quite funny. Got my photo in front of a step and repeat, went upstairs, sat down because of course everybody gets random seats. So Karen and a couple of our friends
they were down the front, weren't they?
They were like second or third row back and I was up in the circle. Still had a good view because let's be fair, it's Yoden Lux and it's a Dolby Vision screen with Dolby Atmos. So you literally cannot go wrong. Everybody who wasn't me, by the sounds of it, had a really good, relaxing experience. So thank you to Disney and Lucasfilm for extending the invite.
We got our physical tickets, which was awesome.
Exactly. At least there's a memento. And I know that there's a chunk of red carpet coming my way. Just a little sliver.
I only need like a little chocolate bar piece to go with the other ones. So no, it's fantastic. It was good. It's always good to get something like that in the UK. But that was my evening. They were tearing everything down by the time we came out. I get the train home from Euston and that's me done for now. But the next day, you had something really cool going on.
Yeah, so the next day we had an invite from Disney. Always should come through Lucasfilm. So it was a casting call for a press thing on the Wednesday evening outside the London Eye. They wanted again 20 generic Jedi. So everybody then had to send me the photos of their in their costumes. So I then send them on to Alex. Obviously at that time, I'm at MCM London, so I'm trying to do that, with the dodgy signal that is Excel Centre. Yeah. We get down to London Eye. We're all in our Jedi costumes as members of Saber Guild and Rebel Legion. And basically, there's a little film crew and photography crew all setting up in front of the London Eye, about 100 meters away, maybe, something like that. We're briefed. And basically, it was for a social kind of like media, couple of videos kind of campaign just to kind of help with the launch of the Acolyte. And it was featuring Kelnacca. So we were told what to do. And it was kind of like we had to kind of slightly figure out it because for the girls and Matt in charge was like, right, okay, well, basically, Kelnacca's going to walk down here. And I want you to stand on each side, like as if it's like an honor guard. And then we want you to do something. If we're going to be an honor guard, let's raise our lightsabers and stuff like that. So we did that. And then obviously you've got the whole kind of fun and games of like, right, who's going to call like when to go? And are we raising on free or are we raising on raise? And
the old lethal weapon thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, to be honest, actually, we did couple of rehearsals, partly because there was, I think, a camera move, like a pan down, and Kelnacca had to start and stuff. And this, by the way, is for the Screen News Kelnacca costume. Don't think Junius was in it. It was definitely a very tall chap who actually does a really good Wookiee impression.
That's right. We filmed the intro. So I go to Fantasy Tracks TV for the 10-minute intro, little Q&A with Leslie and some of the cast. And at the very end, they go, well, hey, Kelnacca, what do you think? And he does... Yeah. Because Eunice does a good roar, doesn't he?
I was going to say Eunice does. That's why I was like, is that Eunice? But I was thinking, I say, if it was Eunice, then I would have thought he would have actually been in person, and not in costume. It's a way of kind of doing something a little bit different and kind of maybe guessing, he wasn't available. So therefore, it fills a gap, shall we say. So that's what we did. We did a couple of walk downs. Kelnacca kind of walks down and stands there and growls, and we raise our lightsabers, and then we do it again, and then we do some other stuff in the circle and that, and then we were done. And actually, what was really cool because there's a lot of general public there, so I think Disney and that were really quite happy that actually this doesn't need to be a behind closed doors kind of thing. So very happy with me taking photos and stuff, which is cool and what have you. So we did, right, well, we're in Jedi costume. Let's go and have a couple of pints. So we went to the All Bar One and basically filled the place full of Jedi and just, had a nice evening. And then I had a long drive back home through Camden and up north to Stevenage.
Good couple of days for us both, I think.
Yeah, good fun and do it all again.
Good stuff. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about the Acolyte over the next, 6 weeks, starting with our Making Tracks reaction chat episode, which will be coming out very, very soon. So tune in for that. But for now, let's dive into the latest Star Wars news. We do kick off with some sad news. Another member of the original Star Wars family has passed away. It's Canadian actress Maria de Aragon. She shot the California reshoots of the Mos Eisley Cantina scenes in A New Hope. She shared the role of Greedo with Paul Blake. She passed away aged 81 in a nursing home in Montreal. as we say, it's another member of the original Star Wars cast that's left us now. Looking into her career, done quite a few films in the 70s, a lot of that sort of fun and funky sort of stuff that she was doing, and then turns up as Greedo in these reshoot scenes. There's some great pictures. In fact, there's a picture on the site of her coming out of the Greedo mask. I don't know whether it makes us feel closer to the film or a little bit further away from the film now that so many of the actors aren't with us, but terrible shame that another one has gone.
Very much so. I take it you never got a chance to meet her. I mean,
no, came close. Yeah. It was planned and never quite landed. It was an insider thing I did. I interviewed when the whole McClunky thing happened. I interviewed Paul Blake for Insider, and then we talked about McClunky. Did this great little piece all about the McClunky stuff, and the plan was to speak to Maria. And in the end, somebody in the States interviewed her, and the two interviews were put together into one article. So I never had the joy or pleasure of speaking to her, sadly. No.
Hi, I'm Duncan Pow, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So Star Wars YouTube, very, very busy at the moment. They're giving us loads of content relating to the Acolyte. They showed us a bit of the red carpet in the States, lots of clips and interviews, loads and loads of teasers. But one of the things they put out was something called Star Wars Conversations. And it's only brief, and I'm hoping there's more of it because it's fascinating. Leslie Headland sitting down with Lucasfilm's Chief Creative Officer, Dave Filoni, to talk about the show and discuss the galaxy in general. Specifically, in Leslie's case, talking about why she wanted to focus in on the Sith and their build towards what we see in the prequel trilogy. It's a fascinating interview. I recommend everybody go and listen to it because it starts off with Leslie, and I say fangirling in the best sense because we know she's a Star Wars fan, but she's very obviously aware of what Filoni's done. But very quickly, the edit pars it down to just two creatives discussing their respective shows. It's a fascinating little piece. But one thing that really stood out was something that Leslie said. It's pretty much what ends the conversation of the video. She says, what George created, it's the North Star. Now, I thought that was very interesting that you hear that from Leslie Headland because it's something we've heard from Dave from obviously when he was working with George on the Clone Wars, and ever since George stepped away, right through to the present day, what George created, it's the North Star. What do you think of that? It gave me great comfort, I guess, to think that the newest creative coming into Star Wars and delivering something very special is thinking what George created, that's what we need to stick to, just like Filoni did. What do you think of that?
One, it gives a great soundbite and possibly is going to be something that might help quiet a few dissenting voices. But those kind of conversations are always fantastic because I always really enjoy listening to directors talk to other directors because they're talking a way that only a director can. And so that conversation is definitely worth a watch. It's a really positive thing to hear. And I think that's partly because, let's be fair, Leslie Headland's a big fan. She's a massive fan. And you get that in the way that she talks and the little kind of like knowledge bombs that she drops every now and again, which, you know, it's stuff that she has probably revered for the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy enough to accept that. I mean, I would be worried if there's anybody in charge of Star Wars who doesn't still consider George to be the North Star, because I think ultimately his DNA is so evident in just about all the films. It's that whole thing, isn't it, of like when something doesn't ring true, chances are it's because it's not like George wanted. You kind of look at stuff and it's like, well, actually, okay, it's great we've done a different spin, but are you now detracting from the original intent rather than embellishing it and supporting it?
Here's a thought then, because what you say I very much agree with. George makes Star Wars in 1977 and the limitations of the technology meant that he wasn't completely happy with what he got from Star Wars. And as the trilogy went on, he was happier. He got more and more of what he wanted. And that was very much the case with the prequel trilogy. You know, he said it was like 30% Phantom, 50% clones, 70% Sith. He got more and more of what he wanted. He couldn't blame the technology in the prequel trilogy because it was pretty much, he could do what he wanted. That's the whole point of the, you know, Light and Magic showed us that what happened on Jurassic meant he really had the scope to do a lot of what he wanted. Because we've watched these things so much and we've chewed them over so much.
Yeah.
We accepted what we got, especially with the original trilogy. And there's George with this brand new toolbox in 1996 when he's deciding to do the special editions. And you realise that George, the creator, was happy to change it. And to a certain degree, it changed the tone of certain things. We just mentioned Maria de Aragon. The classic Han and Greedo sequence is the most talked about change in all of Star Wars. There's something that we accepted it was as it was, and then George changed it. My point is, and I know we're talking on a much, much grander scale of Star Wars, they're like the tent poles of what makes Star Wars Star Wars.
Exactly.
You say something really interesting because you can't put your finger on what is, other than having TIE Fighters, X-Wings and all the toys that we could want to make a Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
But when it's not quite when it doesn't quite feel right, it stands out more than getting it right and feeling correct. It's a weird mixture, isn't it?
Part of it is just down to the lightning in the bottle happenstance. It's the alchemy of what happened at the time and the kind of film that he was trying to put together. If you compare Star Wars to any other of the Star Wars sagas, it has a slightly different tone in that. And like you say, really what they're talking about is they're talking about it on the meta level and talking about it thematically and in ways that is to do with story construction and character development and arcs and that, not necessarily the minutiae of does an X-Wing always need to look like an X-Wing. But at the same time, to your point, I think sometimes, and this is the negative aspect, I think, of Star Wars, because it's driven by commercialization and it's driven by marketing and stuff, means that they always have to reinvent everything. You can't just pick up a lightsaber. It has to be a new lightsaber, or as we've heard in reports this week, it's going to be light whips and stuff. Now, again, light whips aren't actually anything new in Star Wars. They go back to Dark Horse. However, obviously
further back, Marvel.
Yeah,
doing it.
There you go. However, obviously we haven't seen it on screen, so they're going to make a big whoop-de-doo, which probably will then mean that Hasbro will probably try and put out some kind of light whip at some point or another, and then wait for the complaints to come in when 12-year-olds start getting whipped across the high street, probably by me and you as we're trying to practice it. But that's my point. It's reinventing Star Wars. And I know they always say it's like reinventing Star Wars for new audience and stuff, but it's staying faithful to the core DNA. It will depend upon the person sat in the chair watching and consuming. George has summed up brilliantly in Empire Strikes Back when Yoda says, only what you take with you. So whatever baggage and whatever preconceived notions you've got when you go into a cinema or you go and press play on a Disney Plus episode of Acolyte or anything like that, that is what is going to inform you. And sometimes it makes it very, very difficult to then change your perceptions because that's what you think and that's your opinion, which is why both me and you say, and I think the ethos of Fantha has always been going with an open mind. And then if it's crap, then we've got something to talk about in the next week's episode of Reaction Chat.
That's a very good point. But do you think, and it's a broader point, sort of riffing off this, that we're now 47 years into Star Wars, 48 if you count the novel coming out in 76. At some point in the future, Star Wars doesn't necessarily need to reference external things to Star Wars. Star Wars can just reference its own stuff. After a point, after a while, you'll get a filmmaker comes in who was completely raised on the new run of Marvel Comics or completely raised on the canon era of Star Wars. Someone's going to come in and their touchstone, their core isn't going to be what George did. Their core is going to be the stuff that riffed off what George did. And at some point in the future, whereas now we think visually, it's got to have that Macquarie vibe. But there's a lot of Star Wars that doesn't. There'll be a point where a filmmaker will come in and absolutely smash it with the Star Wars film. And his main influence will not be what George did. It will be derivatives, if you like the clone of the clone of the clone of what George did. Yeah. To a point where it's kind of not that DNA of what George created. It's still Star Wars. We still accept it. But the audience is new. The older farts like us will look at it and I like it, but it's not really Star Wars, is it? But all the new kids come in and going, this is Star Wars? Yeah. Of course it's Star Wars. It's like an alien landing on Earth and one lands in India and that culture and another lands in, Spain and that culture. They're both on Earth, but their experiences are going to be completely different, but one no less valid than the other. As older fans who've really seen most of it from day one, for the most part. Yeah. Do you think we'll still be able to be as invested? Do you think we're going to be able to roll with it? Or do you think we're going to turn into that grumpy old get off my land kind of fan, which we right now can't stand, but maybe it's in the future. I don't know. And you can believe this. I hope that we don't. And I think that's part of it. Some people just don't like change. And there are probably some fans who've got to that point whereby they're happy with the 6 films. I'm sure there's probably fans who are happy with the 1 film. But the thing is that, and I think we see this in stuff that sometimes references Star Wars as an influence. If you're too literal, then it doesn't work. But if you take those deviations and you can flip it, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because I think that's where sometimes maybe the biggest downfall with some of the more modern Star Wars has been. And actually, to be fair, George is to blame for this as much as anybody. We're going to do an episode based on Hitchcock. Yeah. And I know you can do that in a slightly experimental form and stuff. And that in itself makes it interesting. But the problem is with that is that it then becomes very one note, whereas you look at A New Hope and you look at the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy, you can start to go, well, actually, there's about 11 or 12 different influences for this one film. All the films that Rian Johnson used to reference for Last Jedi, that shows it's coming from a director who not only is trying to channel and continue Star Wars, but is actually understanding that it's the references and the
inspiration that Lucas was being used to kind of create that original story idea is important. And to that point, you kind of think that it all kind of feeds back into itself and it's all going to be slightly cyclical. Okay, I don't ever think we, at least in my lifetime, I don't think we'll get away from George being an influence in the same way as Gene Roddenberry is still touted as being the main influence for Star Trek. James Bond and Ian Fleming, you have to pay respect and homage to the original creator, but it's obviously how that gets interpreted throughout the years. If they say Star Wars is the evergreen franchise that it is, but actually it continuously creates new content. Let's say 150 years time, me and you get reanimated and we go and watch a Star Wars. It's like, I wonder how much of that we'd still be able to pick out and go, that's referencing Attack of the Clones, or that's like that scene from Rise of Skywalker. That would be interesting. I mean, I'd love to see it, but I don't think I ever will.
I don't think they'd reanimate us if they could.
No, it's not worth the money.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So this week, Kathleen Kennedy, she spoke with the New York Times, and one of the topics, obviously apart from the Acolyte on its way, was about the difficulties that she believes women face in the Star Wars arena. And there's a couple of quotes from Kathleen. She says, "My belief is that storytelling does need to be representative of all people. That's an easy decision for me. Operating within these giant franchises now with social media and the levels of expectation, it's terrifying. I think Leslie has struggled a little bit with it. I think a lot of the women who step into Star Wars struggle with this a bit more. Because of the fan base being so male-dominated, they sometimes get attacked in ways that can be quite personal." Now, Leslie Headland mentioned this very topic. It kind of echoes what Ewan McGregor, when he stood up for Moses Ingram a couple of years ago when Kenobi was happening and she was getting battered by some corners of the fandom. It is rather disconcerting, and something that Leslie had said, just another quick quote, "As a fan myself, I know how frustrating some Star Wars storytelling in the past has been. I've felt it myself. I stand by my empathy for Star Wars fans, but I want to be clear, anyone who engages in bigotry, racism or hateful speech, I don't consider a fan." Well, I think that's the thing that many of us can echo. So glad she said that, and it's well stated. But go back to Kathleen Kennedy. Of all people saying this, and she's the top of the chain, she's the top of the tree, she's the boss of Lucasfilm, the president, put there by George himself before George even sold the company, which a lot of people forget. So she's been in that position a long time, and it's a perfectly relevant topic to discuss. But because of a fan base that will weaponize every little thing that she says, when Kathleen Kennedy says these things, which feel like the most obvious things to say, they get turned into something that perhaps they're not. And she says that women struggle in this male-dominated fan space as creators and as fans. What do you make of that? You're the CEO of the Rebel Legion UK. You're dealing with people on the ground all the time at events. How do you see it?
I mean, it's really interesting because, like, for example, for Rebel Legion, I couldn't tell you what the split is in terms of male, female, and other genders in the club. At least I would say, for the most part, there's probably almost as many, if not in Elstree Base, I can say at least. There's me and Jeff at the top. I'm the commanding officer and Jeff's my XO. Now, I took over from Susie Stelling, who was the BCO for 7 years. But I've noticed that in my team, the next senior person down is the base membership officer. That is empathy. And then a lot of the detachment leaders are women. And that's not by choice. I didn't kind of turn around and go, that's what we're going to do. We're going to change the kind of like the makeup. It was more of a case of actually who's right for the job, who actually wants to do it. And in a volunteer organization, who's got the time, who's got the knowledge, and more importantly, who actually wants to do it for nothing. That's what it kind of comes down to.
Yeah.
Obviously, working in film and TV, it's been a positive change for actually more female directors, and DOPs are really getting the high profile gigs now, which 10 years ago they didn't. So that in itself is an improvement. When it comes to other things to do with, say, like ethnicity and that, I mean, I still think at least quite a way behind. I mean, there's proactive movements and policies. I mean, I work for Sky. That's a very equal opportunity employer. However, I guess it kind of comes down to the same as Star Wars, right? If you don't connect with somebody who's doing that job, if you don't see yourself in that job because you're not represented, because you're a minority, then chances are you'll be like, well, that job's not for me. I'm going to go and look somewhere else. And that's the same thing that's happened in Star Wars, because actually in the UK, we've always struggled to attract really any non-white members, really. I mean, we have some, but it's something that doesn't seem to appeal. Now, interestingly, I noticed, because it's been a couple of years since I've been to MCM Comic Con in London, the numbers of Black and Asian costumers and cosplayers, I reckon has quadrupled, if not 10 times more than there was.
It was noticeable just as a casual. I noticed it as well.
Yeah, and that's, we're not stood around going, oh, that person's that person's that, what have you. You're actually seeing more people, more people coming up and actually talking to me about, oh, what's your club? Blah, blah, blah. And you can say, well, this is what we do. And yes, okay, if you're Asian, you can be a Luke Skywalker. It's about costume. It's not about the person wearing the costume. From my perspective, I think we're making positive steps in the industry. I think that Lucasfilm and Stars have made some positive steps. We've had Deborah Chow directing. The big statement will be a female Star Wars director, which potentially Patty Jenkins, maybe not, as if Rogue Squadron or whatever it is actually gets made. That'll be another interesting story. But then you've got to look at the character side. And, I think one thing that the High Republic has done very well to address is it's a lot more female leads at all ages of the publishing, from the adults of YA and stuff. Vanessa Rowe, she started off as a Padawan in the phase 1, and she's now like a Jedi Master and an Acolyte and that, so to have these kind of characters through a whole publishing program like that, from my perspective, I've seen a change. I think it's a positive change. It's definitely not a get off my lawn change. But then if you were to ask somebody else, if you were asked to maybe ask female members of the club, they might say, well, it's a start, but it's still not good enough. So it's always going to, like I said, it's always going to come down to your perspective. And as two white middle-aged men, we have a different perspective, but I'd like to think that we're positive enough that we support anybody who wants to make a Star Wars, let alone being male or female.
I kind of put you on the spot with that, and I only did it because of what you do with the Rebel Legion. It's probably an unfair thing to ask you, but I totally see what you're saying, and definitely right about our perspective. We can only see any scenario from our own perspective, but we're not living it, are we? It's difficult. So I know, as the guy that's running Fantha Tracks day by day with the content, I'd love more female voices. I'd love more diversity to be involved with Fantha Tracks. I'd absolutely welcome it. And it's not something we actively go out and do, because as a site, as a podcast network, we've kind of evolved organically. And I wouldn't want to force the voices that are there, but I'd love the world to know that it's an open door. And if you've got something interesting to say, just come and talk Star Wars with us. That's what we want to do. So there's no policy there, because we're just a fan site. We're just doing this for the love of it. But I would love for there to be more. So that's only my perspective. Going back to Kathleen Kennedy's point, she's so correct. She's so right in what she says. And I'm saying this as we run right up to the Acolyte. And on Fantha, for example, the only thing I can really point to with any sort of confidence, every social media post we put out about the Acolyte in our comments section, mostly it seems on Instagram and Facebook, the negativity has been, depressing is not the right word, that's a misused word, but it's upsetting. Is this our fan base? Is this what they really think? Is this how vitriolic they are towards something that they've literally not seen? I mean, you've seen the first 2 episodes. I'm fortunate I've seen the first 4 episodes. I've got screeners. I know how good this show's going to be. So do you. We're fortunate to be in that position. My point is, they've not seen anything other than a few teasers and a few trailers. They're judging the show on the fact that it's a female writer, showrunner, director. Her wife is in the show. There's a very diverse cast who are awesome to a man. Everyone is just on point. We're very fortunate as Star Wars fans to be getting a top quality show coming along, and yet the undercurrent from the fan base, not all of it. I mean, it's always the smallest percentages that shouts the loudest. It is. That's just life. That's just life. It must be disheartening. That's the word I was looking for. It must be disheartening. And for Kathleen Kennedy, who again is ready to roll out this great grand new thing, a brand new era, a live action telling of this fantastic new run up to basically to the prequels, which we're celebrating 25 years of this, this year. I think a lot of her comments are going to get picked up and run with in completely the wrong way.
Hello, this is not R2D2. This is John Thompson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Okay, so back in May, we were up at Burnley for Star Wars Fan Fun Day. It was an absolutely fantastic weekend, as it always is, and they had a dozen fantastic guests and we spoke to 9 of them. We haven't brought any of the interviews from Star Wars Fun Day to Fantha Tracks yet this year, but we're going to do it right now. So here's our chat with Duncan Pow. Melchi from Rogue One and from Star Wars Andor is in season 1. He may or may not be in season 2. He wasn't talking about that, but he was talking about loads of other stuff. So here's our chat with Duncan Pow from Rogue One and Andor here on Making Tracks.
Right, I'm here with Duncan.
Hiya.
We're at Star Wars Fun Day in Blackburn.
Yep.
It's a lovely day. We're looking out at the pitch. But how is the day for you so far?
Well, I've had my back to the outside and the sun. So, but apart from that, it's been great.
Yeah.
Lovely to meet the fans and just to be here.
Do you get too many events?
Events like this?
Yeah.
Now and again.
Yeah.
When I get asked, I go.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy them?
Yes. I like to, like I say, for me, being a part of the Star Wars universe is, well, it comes with a certain level of responsibility. So it's nice to meet the fans and to hear that they've enjoyed what it is that you've done and been involved in. So, and it's nice for them to hear a wee bit about, what takes place when we're doing the work.
Of course.
Yeah.
So the role of Melchi, how did it come to you? How did it develop into what it became? Obviously through Rogue One and into Andor.
Well, you'd have to. Now that's a question for the executive producer, Tony Gilroy. It's not a question for me. The character developed in Tony's mind, which turned into scripts, which turned into a phone call to come and be involved, and I will do anything that guy asks me. So that's how I ended up where I am.
Yeah. So running off Rogue One, I mean, obviously Rogue One was a mind-blowing success, $1 billion film. Nobody expected. I was going to say Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expected more from that because of that sort of Wild Bunch ending, but then Andor comes along, and you're involved in Andor, of course. So how did that come to you as an actor? How did that roll along?
How did it come along? Well, I was getting ready in 2020 to go to South America, to travel to the Amazon.
Nice.
And just before I left, I had a call from my agent who said, we've had a call from the office of Nina Gold, who said you should have a chat with Tony Gilroy because Andor's going into production and Tony has some plans for you.
Yeah.
So give him a call. So I gave Tony a phone call and he said, well, I was just about to give you a call. And he told me his plans for the series, for the character. I told him I was off in the Amazon. He said, come back in one piece.
Yeah.
Of course, I went in the Amazon. While I was in the Amazon, the pandemic happened.
Right.
So
was that a good place to be during the pandemic or a bad place to be?
Well, I got home, but it's not a good place to be when you go in there thinking you're going to come out and start filming, Andor, and to come out and find that instead of doing what you thought you were going to be doing, the whole world has shut down. Yeah. But I made it home in one piece, and we all went through together what we had to go through, and it was good to know. Much later than anticipated that the show went into production, and just to be involved was a gift, and I cannot take my hat off enough to the producers, the crew, the directors, everybody who was involved, from top to bottom, to make that show during the COVID pandemic. I think to make a show like that anyway is something, maybe if you saw the detail, what goes into making something like that, and think of them making this show during the pandemic with the testing that we had to do with, it blows my mind that you even have a show to watch.
Are you aware of how well regarded that show is amongst the fandom?
Well, yes. Yes, from being here, from coming to places like this. Yeah. But I think also because, I grew up a Star Wars fan, so I'm a Star Wars fan. So I know what I like. And I think when Tony first told me of his plans for the show, how he saw these parts of the Star Wars universe and the plans he had in place, and then it's Tony Gilroy. Yeah. So, when he tells you his plans, and then you know that he's going to be the guy that's going to be overseeing and implementing those plans. Yeah. Then for me, I was thinking, wow, this is going to be something really special. And then and I don't always watch the things that I'm in.
Yeah.
But I watched Andor.
Right.
And for me, who has been a fan of the franchise since 1977, A New Hope came out the year I was born.
Yeah.
The first film I saw in the cinema was Return of the Jedi. So
it's amazing how many people came in on Jedi.
Yeah.
You see it all the time.
Yeah. And then so I know what I like.
Yeah.
And when I watched Andor, I was as blown away as everybody else was, and I'm anticipating season 2.
Yeah.
With the same level of anticipation as the fans. I think it's going to be something really special.
When you watch yourself, just as an aside question, you say you don't generally watch yourself, but when you watch yourself, even though it's in Star Wars, which you're invested in as a fan beyond being an actor, can you kind of step out of it and just kind of forget that that's actually me as that guy? Can you just step out of that for the time being?
Yes. I think with Rogue One, I sort of spoiled that movie for myself because it was the first time I'd been involved,
Yeah.
And so the universe that you're used to watching, all of a sudden you know a wee bit behind,
Sure.
the fourth wall sort of opens up.
Yeah.
And so with Rogue One, I distracted myself from that movie. But as time has passed,
Yeah.
I see exactly what that is.
Yeah.
But with Andor, for some reason, maybe it was because I was involved in it, I didn't have that same experience. I didn't have that same experience of not being immersed in it, And I think that's maybe because of the claustrophobia of filming those prison scenes.
I was going to ask about not keen
made me feel like we were in prison. So when I watched it, I wasn't going, we filmed that and that was here. I was in prison.
Yeah.
Filming that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have that same experience. So I watched that as somebody who could lose themselves in the overall, the overall production, rather than as someone who's watching themselves pretend to be someone else. It was a different experience for me.
I mean, watching the films going all the way back, there's always been these great set pieces, moments. The best bin scenes in Empire, whatever, Hoth, locations. And then you get Narkina 5, which outside of just people who are watching Andor became a thing with just a dunny shouting, one way out and all that stuff. It's become its own thing, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
For you as an actor to be identified with that whole sequence and all the performers that you work with, that must be pretty damn cool as well.
Wow, come on, we could get really sort of... So I'm 13 years a sort of practicing Buddhist, so I don't even really associate myself with the body.
Right. Okay.
No. So what I mean is, I'm hugely grateful to be a part of the production, but I don't come away and go, take any sort of gratification.
Sure.
I feel that whole thing was created by a mind that I can't comprehend.
Yeah.
And so to have been a part of it, I'm so grateful for the people that created that opportunity.
Yeah.
But I don't sit here and go, wow, man, I was a part of that thing. Because I think if you do, then you're going to kind of get a wee bit lost as a human being and as an actor.
Yeah.
I think it's for me it has been a gift to be a part of the Star Wars universe and to have been a part of something that obviously has such resonance with fans and people who have been watching the franchise for as long as I have.
Yeah.
But no, I don't go give myself a pat on the back or anything,
No.
because I feel like it's it is someone else's work that we come and try and sort of give the finishing touches to. So I feel it that way.
Yeah. And final question, obviously, you're in season 2. We know you get out at the back end of season 2 because you're in Rogue One. Without giving anything away, how impressed, how pleased, whatever word you want to use, were you with what was happening in season 2?
I always take my my reaction from the reactions of people I trust, and I have known the team that have the showrunner, the producers, the editors, the directors, everybody, the camera guys, the teams, the crews, the costume designers. I know how precious they are about their work.
Yeah.
And I know that if they aren't enjoying or invested fully in what it is they're doing, you can tell.
Sure.
And the reaction from all of them. And I remember my first day in makeup. And I remember I was in there chatting, and one of the makeup designers, she said, "It's going to blow your mind." And I think if you have that experience from somebody who's maybe when you come in and you're getting ready and you're getting prepared, that might not be that's how passionate the whole of the team is. And if they're saying it's going to blow your mind, if makeup is saying it's going to blow your mind, it's probably going to blow your mind.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thanks for giving us your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Visit fanthatracks.com or be sure to comment, like and share on our social media feeds at Fanthatracks. Send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Temple for composing the Fanthatracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings, 9 o'clock UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday at 7 o'clock UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks, and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks. And remember, fanthatracks.com, our social media feeds, Fanthatracks TV and Fanthatracks Radio are absolutely so no Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Kickstarter or Indiegogo required to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Awesome. Well, I think for now that is all we have got time for. Join us very, very soon for the first episode of Reaction Chat. Until then, have a great time. Enjoy the Acolyte, everybody. Stay positive. And of course, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.